Shane Gillis, live on stage.
I'm a bit of a history buff, which, by the way, that is early onset Republican.
His biggest tour ever is coming to Des Moines.
You're a white dude in your 20s and 30s, and you're like, I can't stop reading about World War II. It's coming, bro. You're right.
See Shane Gillis with his unmistakable comedic style. Live at Wells Fargo Arena Saturday, May 31st. Get tickets now at iowaeventcenter.com. For more, visit ShaneMGillis.com.
Jason Aldean, Full Throttle Tour 2025, powered by Patriot Mobile. When the lights come on. Friday, September 19th, Wells Fargo Arena. With Nate Smith. And Ray Lynn. Jason Aldean. On sale now at iowaeventcenter.com. Jason Aldean live.
Let's do it. Welcome to Bigger Than 12 on Iowa Everywhere. We're in the Channel Seed Studios. Back on a Tuesday night, just like old times during football season. And conveniently, let's just talk football. How about that? We can ignore basketball for the night.
You know me, I'm a basketball guy. I don't know. I'd also want to apologize to our listeners today. I know we normally do record on a Sunday, but it didn't make sense for us to record Sunday with the Kansas game on Monday. But I'll tell you what, after that game, maybe we should have recorded on Sunday and pretended like Monday never even happened.
Dude, so on Sunday, another reason we didn't record Sunday was I went to Iowa City for the USC-Iowa game and Caitlin Clark jersey retirement. If we would have recorded Sunday night, I don't know if I would have made it through the show. It's hard to explain. That was one of the most taxing days of work that I've had in so long. So there's so much media there that I was in the second row shooting the game. So I was behind this guy named Owen Sebring, friend of the program out in Cedar Rapids. He's probably 6'3", really well-built dude. And I'm on a stool that is like this tall. Like it's probably the height of this microphone. So I'm like standing straight up with this camera on, and I'm still like getting cut off by Owen in front of me. So it seriously felt like I went on a full workout. And when I got home that night at 9 o'clock, I passed out. And I don't know the last time I went to bed before 1 in the morning. So that was... Maybe it was a blessing in disguise that we held the show until Tuesday. In all seriousness, we will be talking basketball. We'll mainly focus on Iowa State's game against Kansas, considering we're recording right before a big slate of Tuesday Big 12 games. So we're not going to talk much about what happened Saturday between great games like Texas Tech, Houston, KU, Baylor, and we're not going to really preview the Tuesday, Wednesday games either. So we'll focus mainly on Iowa State, KU, and some big picture stuff with the rest of the conference, and then react to the Big 12 schedule release. I didn't think we would ever get it. I was fully prepared to go into next season without a schedule, so I'm glad it's here.
It's about damn time.
But do you know who is good at planning? I just set that up. WealthCharter Retirement Planning and Tax. I promise I didn't write that down. That was off the dome. I guess I'm sharp today, but not as sharp as WealthCharter. Tim Hawkins and his team are celebrating 25 years at WealthCharter Retirement Planning and Tax. For 25 years, they've been simplifying wealth, specializing in, of course, retirement planning, but they do it all for financial management and tax. It is your spot to be to get your finances in check and plan for the future so that, who knows, maybe you can go to Ireland next year to support the Cyclones or save money to do fun stuff following Iowa State athletics or whatever Big 12 program you might support. Thanks to Tim Hawkins and his team for supporting. Go to WealthCharterRetirement.com to schedule an appointment at their Ankeny office. Let's start right there. Iowa State blown out at Kansas, and my oh my, how have things changed since the last time we recorded? Our last show was before the Arizona game, so 3 straight losses since. I think I'm just going to start by asking this question to both of us, and that is Iowa State broken? And I think right now they are. The book is completely out on Iowa State. They're really easy to defend. There's no spacing because of no Milan Momcilovic. Teams are switching everything, and every team has the strategy of let anyone but Curtis Jones beat you, let anyone but Kurt shoot. And on top of that, Kurt's also struggling the last 3 games. So confidence, momentum, it's at an all-time low.
Yeah, I'm probably going to be in the majority, or I guess maybe in the minority here and overreact because that's what I normally do. But it's hard not to after watching 40 minutes of that on Monday night in Lawrence. And let me say, like you said, this team desperately needs Milan back. And I honestly didn't think that they would look this poorly without him. And even, they did find a way to win a couple games, but that feels like a lifetime ago, especially after that Arizona game. You mentioned spacing. This team has to space out better. And Milan did bring that to the table with his ability to shoot the 3. I mean, looking back, the guy was shooting actually over 44% from behind the arc, and nobody in the last few games is even remotely close to that. But just kind of going back to Monday, it was just so ugly to watch. And I can't speak for anyone else here, but within the first 10 minutes of that game, I felt like Kansas just won that game. Like, I didn't feel an ounce of confidence for Iowa State to win that game. And in the first half alone, they shot 23% from the floor, 8% from 3, which is it's like almost impossible to do. And I guess you could say it did get better in the second half. The shooting numbers were better, but still overall just not great. And the other thing that bothered me is just even from the free throw line, 55% from the free throw line. That's not good. And that's even worse when you're on the road. And you mentioned Curtis Jones. He's been able to carry this team at times, but in his last 3 games, he's averaged like 9 points. I had looked it up. He actually shot 21% from the field in his last 3 games. That's just not the guy we saw a few weeks back. And maybe it's too much pressure on him to produce or whatever it is, but he's certainly not the same player. But again, he's the guy that came off the bench and now he's in a starting role. And I feel like almost on a nightly basis or every game, he's got to drop like 20 for this team to be in it, really.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on him, and teams are switching everything. So the Cyclone's best offense, even when Milan was on the floor, is kind of that top of the key. Kurt maneuvers his way around a screen. He can go left, he can go right. If the defense goes under, he can pull up for 3. And if they don't go under, he's been able to really get a defender behind him and use that floater. But when teams are switching everything, it makes that really difficult, and there is a lot of pressure on him. And while I will say, I do think because of what we've talked about, the spacing, the team switching everything, the lack of confidence from role players, and seemingly no momentum, while I think Iowa State's broken right now, I don't think the season is over at all. I think both things can be true. Because one, basketball is a sport with tons of variance. The 3-point shot is the best example. I watch so much NBA, and the NBA is a hard sport to break down because if you just look at a lot of box scores, you see, the Hornets upset the Celtics. Let's see what happened. Charlotte hit 19 threes and Boston hit well below their season average, and that's what happened. And a lot of times it's lazy, but you can break basketball down to that. KU shot above their average from 3 at Fog Allen Fieldhouse, just like Iowa State shot well above their average at Hilton against Kansas a couple weeks ago. And both teams won those respective games by double digits. Sometimes that's what happened. And I think psychologically, it can't be measured what the Caleb Love 3 fourth quarter shot did to everyone involved. You look at TJ Otzelberger's expression. That's something that's really hard to bounce back from, and it's something that we can't know from the outside of that locker room. But the good news for Iowa State, there's precedent. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, and I don't want to break any news to anyone. But Iowa State is not the first great team to be blown out at Fog Allen Fieldhouse. In fact, it used to always happen. Hell, even a couple years ago, 2020, the 2021 Baylor team that won it all, they lost by 13 at Fog Allen Fieldhouse. It happens. I'm not making excuses. It was a pitiful performance by Iowa State. And then my last point before I'll hand it back off to you is Iowa State has had a lull every single year under TJ Otzelberger. TJ's first year, 2022, 4-game losing streak in February. At that point, they were out of the tournament. There was no question that they were on the outside looking in. They responded with 3 straight wins in February to get in the tournament, get themselves an 11 seed, and make a run to the Sweet 16. A response. 2023, again, 4 straight losses in February. Caleb Grill, one of the team's leading scorers, kicked off the team. What do? They go and win at Baylor to close the regular season. A win that nobody expected. And then last year, there wasn't really a losing streak. But at the end of February, Iowa State was playing really, really bad offensive basketball. They had close calls with West Virginia, with Oklahoma. They trailed by 15 against BYU, came back and won. And they were not playing good basketball, but found their groove in Kansas City, went on to make the Sweet 16. So my point is, I have no doubt this team will bounce back. And with the 4-game stretch they have coming up before Houston and the possibility of Milan coming back, I would fully expect them to do that.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to harp too much on Curtis Jones. I'm sure you didn't either, just because of the pressure I know that's going to be on him. But
it's not on him.
Yeah, there's other guys on this team that just simply aren't hitting their shots either. And sometimes they're really not guarded very heavily, I guess you could say, because they're just not really a threat to score. And I'm glad you mentioned TJ earlier, because he's not a guy that's always full of emotions, but I feel like even when the camera was zoomed in on him at times, you could see the expression kind of on his face, like, damn, I got to stop this thing from the wheels falling off. But, and like Fran said on the broadcast, once Milan comes back, this team is going to have high expectations. And maybe, honestly, it's not fair to truly judge this team without him, because he's such a critical piece, especially to the offensive side. So, and you mentioned earlier, there is some good news in sight. The schedule does let up a bit here in the next 2 weeks. They got TCU, UCF, Cincinnati, and Colorado here over the next couple weeks. That's a great opportunity for this team to really bounce back and get back in the Big 12 title race.
Yeah, it's a good opportunity. Iowa State will be favored in all 4 of those games, but as we've seen, that doesn't mean anything.
Nope.
The gap between K-State and TCU and UCF and Cincy, it's probably nothing. So we have a precedent of K-State going into Hilton and winning by 19. So it's not just, it's at Hilton, you can chalk up the win. It's not that by any stretch of the means. And at the same time, I also don't think just Milan coming back is going to magically solve every problem. There is no doubt it's going to help, but I also do think it's a legitimate concern to think that just bringing back one player who's an extra shooter, of course, who's going to space the floor, isn't going to fix everything. But what I do know is that right now, Iowa State has one player that other teams are respecting on the perimeter, that, of course, being Curtis Jones. And when you bring back a 44% three-point shooter in Milan that can do it off the dribble, he can catch and shoot, they're going to have to respect 2. And that will no doubt be a good thing. I hope Iowa State fans don't have this expectation that the second Milan comes back, it's going to look like the team that beat Marquette, the team that went on the road and beat Texas Tech immediately, because it's probably going to take time with where they're at right now.
And who knows, it's probably going to take some time for Milan maybe to come back fully healthy. It might take him a couple games just to kind of get in his groove too. So you're right about that. It's not going to be an instant fix right away.
And even when Milan comes back, there's no doubt that Iowa State needs more from the bench. Of course, the sixth man will either most likely be Jones or Momcilovic, and that will help the bench scoring naturally. You won't have many points of getting 0 points from the bench. when you have one of those two guys as the sixth man. But no matter what they get from Jones, Momcilovic, they need more out of Chatfield, and then Heisey or Watson, whoever, I guess, gets that eighth spot if they shrink the rotation back to 8. All three of those players, they're hustling. I think they're all tough, but none of them are irreplaceable on offense. All three of them mostly have been invisible on offense, and that cannot happen making a deep tournament run. You're going to need Heisey to get back to his mid-December form. You're going to need Chatfield to kind of be an enforcer again, which he really hasn't the last few weeks. You're also going to need Keyshawn Gilbert to return to consistent form. I think he's probably the one that will benefit the most from Momcilovic returning. Even if it goes from teams stacking 3 guys in the paint to 2, it'll make it a lot easier for Gilbert to get back in his groove, because the team just isn't the same when Keyshawn isn't himself. But of course, the book is still out on Iowa State whether or not they have Momcilovic or not. Every team is going to try and suck the game into the paint as much as possible, or I guess stuff the paint as much as possible and force Iowa State to beat them on the perimeter. So it's a lot to watch. We still don't know when Milan's going to come back.
Nope. And just got to take it one game at a time here. And, the opportunity to have a 2 seed is still on the table. Probably the 1 seed's likely off at this point, but the 2 seed's still there for this team to try to get. And it just starts one game at a time, starts with TCU on Saturday.
I honestly don't know if the 1 seed's off the table. I don't know if this is likely or not, but we'll just talk about winning out except at Houston. That puts you at 27-6 overall, 28-6 somewhere around, or probably 26-6 around that range. I don't know. There's still a lot to play for. At this point, I do think you're right, though. The focus should be on grabbing one of those top 8 spots, being a 1 or a 2 seed. But we haven't talked a lot about Kansas. They pick up a marquee win, a team that had been really, really struggling. Blew a 21-point lead at Baylor on Saturday. Of course, somehow choked the Houston game away a week ago. And they pick up a win at home over a top 10 team that wasn't in doubt at any point of the game. Has your opinion on Kansas changed at all?
It's hard to say because it's one game for me. I think you're right about watching that Baylor game. I didn't really pay that close of attention to it because once I saw they were up by like almost 20 or 17, whatever it was, I thought that they had that game won. But yet again, Kansas finds a way sometimes to lose games. And I think you're seeing a lot in the conference just in general. These teams are just completely different on the road than they are at home. Like Kansas is great. Fog Allen Fieldhouse is great. I think, what are they, 38-0 on Big Monday, which is absurd. That's an absurd stat. It is what it is. And
it makes sense. It makes sense.
Once again, yeah. It's the way they play there has been fantastic. But again, you're not always going to get a consistent, like a guy like Hunter Dickinson. You might not get hit that Hunter Dickinson every single night. You're not going to get him on the road. We've seen him rattled before. We saw him at Hilton. That was very rattled. So I don't know if I'm fully bought in on this Kansas team just yet. I need to see more consistency over the next few games, the next few weeks for this team before I can say, you know what, I'm really a believer in this Kansas team, because I don't know if I can still put them in my top 3 or 4 in the conference at this point.
Yeah, my opinion hasn't really changed at all. What they did Monday night is what they're supposed to do. They're Kansas. They have the most expensive roster in college basketball. They have the best atmosphere in college basketball. So while impressed with what they did, impressed with what they got from AJ Storr, who hasn't done much this year, I was impressed by how KJ Adams competed. I was impressed by all of that stuff. It still doesn't necessarily change my outlook for them big picture. Because at this point, I'm not really throwing them in the Big 12 title conversation, just like I'm not really throwing Iowa State in that conversation anymore. The expectation, the goal in Lawrence is to make a Final Four and to win a national championship, and I still don't think this KU team is near or as good as some of those teams in the past. And a lot of that comes to that Baylor game. It was only 3-4 days ago, and it's unexplainable. And we've seen, that they sleptwalked through that UCF game at home. They lost at West Virginia at home. So this team, it has the talent. There's no doubt, but I still don't know how well constructed it is. And I think if you've read between the lines of a lot of Bill Self's press conferences, I think there's some self-reflection on how he built this team as well. But I can say that I was impressed with Kansas for the night. In the same realm as you, I need to see a lot more.
It's a lot of pieces to a puzzle that's still trying to be put together right now. That's what it is.
Yeah, and they've got what you need. They've got a guard that can take over in March. What you need to win a national championship is you need a few guards. I still just don't see DeJuan Harris as the guy to be able to be a part of that core 2 or 3 guards. Zeke Mayo, of course, is good enough. We've seen that, but if they could get more out of Rylan Griffin as that true 2 guard, which I think is what they really brought him in to be, I think that would make life a lot easier on Harris. And if Rylan Griffin turns into 2023-24 Rylan Griffin that played a huge part in Alabama's Final Four run, then I will be more in on Kansas. But I want to close with one more topic about Iowa State before we'll talk a little Jerome Tang. So of Iowa State's 3 straight losses, which one feels the worst? Because there's an obvious one that is the worst. A quad 2 loss at home by 19. Which one feels the worst looking back at the last week?
I think it's Arizona, just because how emotionally draining that loss was to me, because you think you're going to win that game. Obviously, we can debate on if they should have fouled, what they should have done here. And let's face it, Caleb Love hit a 1 in a million shot there. It was luck, nothing to do with skill there. And I think that was just so demoralizing for this team. And I don't know how they played overtime. Once that happened, I didn't feel good about their chances in overtime. I can't speak for anybody else there, but I didn't feel great about that overtime. And I think you saw that kind of play maybe into Saturday even. And it's going to take some time to kind of get over that. People will say, oh, you can forget things so easy, and that guys that age will forget things so easy and just move on. Well, sometimes you really can't, and it might take a little bit. It was a tough loss, an emotional loss at that. So again, I don't know how you can't say that would. I could point to that one specifically and be like, you know what, that's where the problem started mentally for this team, and I think it kind of just carried over into Saturday, and now obviously into Monday as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting take, because I'm going to go K-State, but I think that loss feels worse because of what happened at Arizona. So all 3 of these games sort of blend together. And the reason that I would go K-State, I was courtside, and I felt more of an edge from K-State. I felt more toughness. I felt more mental toughness, which is not ever what I've grown to expect from an Iowa State team. There's been maybe 1 or 2 games I can think of that I've been in the building for where Iowa State got out toughed. And that was certainly one of them. And that's what I think was the most concerning about that. On the flip side, we can talk about the Kansas game a little bit more. I didn't sense toughness was an issue, which was a little more encouraging to me. The offensive stuff, of course, was a problem, but I felt more fight, and it was a frustrating night, there's no doubt, but I just didn't feel the same type of fight against K-State, and that's what made that loss feel the worst. But again, I hope that above all else, of those 3 games, is still the biggest learning lesson going forward, is that if you guys don't play Iowa State basketball, if you guys aren't the toughest team out there, you will lose. And I hope that's the message. I guess I shouldn't say I hope. I know that's the message going forward. I hope that message can get through to the team.
I think on paper, if you're looking at those 3 games and just an overall back-to-back here in front of you, you could probably point to the Kansas State game and be like, yeah, that's by far the worst loss. To me, I just think just because the way they lost at Arizona, the shock of it to me is why I probably would pick Arizona here.
Yeah, we'll see how Iowa State responds from this 3-game stretch. We'll move on to K-State for a little bit in just a minute. But first, I want to thank Freedom Tire. Or maybe I don't want to thank Freedom Tire. They did such a good job with my tires that they allowed my car to make it all the way down to Lawrence, Kansas. And I had to watch that disastrous performance in person. If I went to some other unnamed tire shop or auto body shop, my car could have broke down halfway and I would have never made it to the game. And I probably would have been happy that didn't happen. But instead, Freedom Tire did such a great job on my car that I made it to and from Lawrence, Kansas safely. In all seriousness, thank you to Freedom Tire. Quentin Crowner and his team do such a great job at all 5 of their locations in Ames, Altoona, Des Moines, West Des Moines, and Urbandale. Or is it Urbandale? I can never remember. Thank you to Quentin Crowner and his team at Freedom Tire. They'll do anything for your car. Just
probably would have had a better time if your car did break down on the way to Lawrence.
I probably would have.
Yeah.
Imagine if it. Yeah, I'm trying to think of that. What if? What if that happened? No, I'm kidding. I'm glad. It's always fun to experience the fog. It's the best atmosphere in college basketball, and it's always a cool experience, even in a demoralizing blowout loss. Speaking of a blowout and a demoralizing loss, Kansas State. 3 wins in a row. We don't want to date it too much because they will play on Wednesday night. But have the Wildcats turned a bit of a corner in Big 12 play?
I think so, with the way they've been playing lately. 2 weeks ago, this team was dead. People like me and you buried this team 6 feet in the ground, held a funeral service for them, and called it a year. But to their credit, they have dug themselves out of a hole. Started conference play going 1-6. Now have won 3 straight, including 2 wins over ranked teams in West Virginia and against Iowa State. And you just look at their numbers here in conference play. They're playing much better. They're now in the top half of points allowed per game and are shooting much better offensively as a team. And in fact, in their last 3 games, they're giving up only an average of 59 points per game. And meanwhile, they're averaging almost 80 per game. So that's quite the difference there. But it's like, to me, I look back at some of their box scores. All of their starters in just about every game here in the last 3 to 4 games have been in double digits. And I know it's a small sample size, but I do feel a lot better about this team than I did a few weeks ago. But and as great as this little stretch is, we are going to find out a whole lot about this Kansas State team. They got Kansas on Saturday, host Arizona 2 days later before heading out to Provo to take BYU. So that is a really tough stretch there for the Wildcats.
Yeah, they've turned a corner. There's no doubt they're playing better basketball. Really dating back to when they fell down, I think it was 18-2 in Fog Allen Fieldhouse, and battled back to make that a respectable game. I thought that team was done for the season at that point, and they've responded. Of course, they still lost to KU. They lost at Baylor, but then since 3 straight double-digit wins, it's been, I'm not going to call it an impressive coaching job because this team was expected to make the NCAA tournament and got blown out by Wichita State, got beat by Drake, got blown out by St. John's, lost to Liberty, lost to LSU. So it's still a bad coaching job overall. But the last couple weeks, it has been a good coaching job for Tang to keep the locker room where it is. And we will learn a ton about them, especially their next 2 home games. Those are huge opportunities at the Octagon of Doom. And if they can, who knows, play spoiler, maybe that's their role this year. It would take a minor miracle for them to make the NCAA tournament. They would probably have to win out, lose maybe 1 game to get into that spot. but they can definitely play spoiler for teams like Kansas, Arizona, even Iowa State, again, left on their schedule towards the end of the year.
You're right. They can prevent some of these teams from, like, maybe they get an Iowa State getting them instead of getting a 1 seed, they get a 2 seed or maybe a 3 seed. So yeah, it was a massive win on Saturday for them for sure.
Yeah, and like you said, they've already done it. They've already played spoiler a little bit. It'll just be a matter of how much more they can play spoiler. Some more Big 12 news. Tucker DeVries announced today out for the season with shoulder surgery. Tough break for Tucker, a guy that I got to cover at Drake for 3 seasons. Great dude, really good player. Tough break for the Mountaineers. Are they still a tournament team now without DeVries for good, even if it might have been expected?
Yeah, this was the tough one for me. If you look right now, they're sitting at 5-5 here heading into Tuesday, and they're 8th in the conference standings. Lost 3 out of their last 4 since beating Iowa State, which feels like a lifetime ago now. But just with the way things look for them right now, their offense is in quite the slump. Teams are realizing if they can slow down Javon Small, then West Virginia does not have any other consistent scoring options right now. Plus, they don't have that same fire on defense that I saw earlier in the year either. And when you look at their schedule, which I did, they would be lucky, to me at least, to finish 500 in conference play. And I might even say they probably finish 9-11, which means they can only win 4 more games from here on out. And barring a miracle in the Big 12 tournament, I think they're going to be on the outside looking in come Selection Sunday.
Yeah, so the good news is they still have 4 of the best wins in college basketball. They won at Kansas in Fog Allen Fieldhouse. That's about as good as it gets. They beat Iowa State, Gonzaga, Arizona. The Arizona win continues to age like fine wine. So what they've been able to accomplish with and without him has already been super impressive, even if they are fading late. And the good news for their schedule, 0 games against Houston, Kansas, Iowa State, and Arizona remaining. So you're going to be playing a lot of the bottom half of the Big 12. KenPom has them going 5-1 the rest of the way. Or not 5-1, 5-5 the rest of the way. Sorry.
You had me going there for a second.
They've got them going 5-5 the rest of the way. That'd put them at 19-12, 10-10 overall. That's probably good enough to be a 9 or 10 seed, but again, that when you're in that 9, 10, 11 seed range, you don't leave a lot of room for error. So your goal probably has to be 4-6 at the absolute worst. You're looking at 5-5, 6-4 to be tournament locks. I think they'll get that with how their schedule eases up and with how tough of a place Morgantown is to play, especially if you're not one of the absolute top teams in the conference.
Boy, they would take that 5-1 record there. They would love that in Morgantown.
Yeah, 5-1. I hope I didn't get their hopes up too much. The computers don't like you that much, but 5-5 would be respectable. And again, this was a team that was not expected to finish towards the top of the Big 12. So if they were to make the NCAA tournament, you take that no matter what, and then you add in the fact that you're missing arguably your best player, that's even more gravy. So it's still been a great coaching job up to this point by Darren DeVries. All right, Aiden. What do you got for a trivia question today?
I feel like I got a pretty good one, I'm going to be honest.
Is it a Caitlin Clark question since they just retired a jersey?
No, that wouldn't have been a bad idea, though. All right. In the movie Field of Dreams, what's the daughter's name? I got to look it up quick. Karen Kinsella begs her dad, Ray, to keep the field. And the line is, talking about if people come to the field or not. They'll just decide to take a vacation, and they'll come to blank. They'll think it's really boring, so they'll want to pay us. Name the city that she thinks is really boring.
Well, by the look of Jake's face here, I know people can't see, but he looks pretty confused on this one too. So
Do you not know it, Jake?
I'm going to assume he doesn't know it with the look on his face.
I know the city that it's in, but I'm just like making sure that the question is asking.
It's not the city where the field is.
Okay, yeah, so that's why I was confused. I should know this.
I'm going to say just because social media gives this city a hard time, Fort Dodge, Iowa has been given a really bad rep on my feed at least. So I'm going to guess Fort Dodge.
It is not Fort Dodge.
I'm going to guess Dubuque because that's the closest city to Dyersville.
Nope.
Wow. Both of us strike out.
The answer is they'll come to Iowa City. They'll think it's really boring, so they'll want to pay us. The answer is Iowa City.
Well,
Jake, you were just there.
They're not wrong. They will be very bored in Iowa City.
Come on. I know you were wearing a Caitlin Clark jersey under that suit of yours on Sunday.
Oh, I am a respectful journalist. I would never do such a thing. I was wearing... Gosh, what was I wearing? I was wearing light blue that day. Gotta be neutral. Yeah, that's one of the toughest parts of my job. This is gonna sound really like pretentious to complain about, but like when you're going to cover a game, you got to think, okay, because I about wore purple last week to the Iowa State K-State game. Because I'm a guy. I don't plan out what I'm going to wear weeks in advance. So I grabbed a purple dress shirt out of my closet, and then as I was walking to go shower, I'm like, wait a second, it's K-State today. I can't do that. But everyone's done it once, where you go to cover the Oklahoma State game, and you've accidentally got an orange tie on, and you look like a chump.
I don't mind that so much. I have a hard time with people cheering in the press box and cussing and cheering, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, that drives me nuts.
That's the worst. And luckily for me, at least down here, Texas is no longer in the SEC, so I don't hear it as much without them in the conference.
Yeah,
Oklahoma too.
It's not the accidentally wearing the colors is not like a real problem, but it's something that between us, especially local news folk, it's kind of like, oh, nice you're wearing. We do it a lot in high school sports too. Like, oh, nice, wearing black and gold for Southeast Polk. Just a Rams homer for the day, I guess. But we're not here to talk about high school football. We're here to talk about Big 12 football. Schedule's here, finally. Just bring me to football season, I guess. If you haven't seen the schedule, go on social media, look at it. We don't have 3 hours to do the show, so we're not going to go break down every single game and every single day and what we think. But I thought it would be fun if we started out by narrowing it down to one Saturday that we think is the best if we're looking at it from a very wide perspective for 7-8 months down the road.
Oh, that chart. Jeez. I feel dyslexic when I just look at that chart.
See, I printed mine out.
I don't know how people look at those. I've never.
That's so bad.
I'm not even going to put that on the screen anymore.
Oh, it's so bad. It hurts my eyes just when you put it on the screen. Do you want me to go first here?
Yeah. Okay. What Saturday stands out to you as the best?
I picked two, and I'm going to explain my answer here. One's for the non-conference. One's going to be for conference play. For the non-conference, it's week 2. It's not even close. Arizona State, Mississippi State, Oklahoma State at Oregon, Iowa at Iowa State, Kansas at Missouri, Baylor at SMU, Stanford at BYU. There's a couple others, but that's a pretty damn good slate for the Big 12 and gives them a great opportunity to prove themselves on a national level. As far as in-conference play goes, there were a few that did stick out to me. Jake's still looking at his chart there. But looking at week 9 in late October looks to me like a great Saturday.
What date is that? Is that the 25th?
Which is it's actually the greatest day on the Iowa Everywhere Network because it's actually my birthday. So yeah, it's the 25th.
The 25th. Gotcha. Okay, so I had that one in pencil. So it's got BYU, Iowa State. It's got Colorado, Utah.
Houston at Arizona State, Kansas State at Kansas, Oklahoma State at Tech, and then TCU at West Virginia.
Yeah, that's a solid Saturday slate. I had a pretty clear 1-1. I'll start with my runner-up, and it would be Week 11, or not Week 11, but second to last week, however many stupid weeks are in a 12-week football season. The second to last week, which would be November 22nd. This one has Arizona State at Colorado, Kansas at Iowa State, which has been a game that KU has dominated under Lance Leipold and will most likely have some Big 12 title implications. And then K-State at Utah. K-State, a team that I think gets a pretty favorable schedule, but we still don't know what Utah is going to look like this season. And if there's a world where Utah gets back towards the top of the Big 12, but there's also a world where they're sitting at 6-6, 7-5, and they can play spoiler for a K-State team that could be competing for the college football playoff. And the last place you want to go is Salt Lake City when that's happening. But as much as I like that week's slate, I got to go October 18th.
Oh, one week before. Okay.
So this week's got Tech at Arizona State. I'm buying my stock in Texas Tech. I think they're going to be really good. And Arizona State, I mean, I think they've got a really favorable schedule. If you look at their home games, really the only ones I could even picture them losing are Texas Tech and TCU. This will be a huge statement opportunity for them. We've got the Holy War, which I don't care what the record of those teams are. It's going to be a great game this year. It's in Utah. We saw an instant classic in Provo this last season. And then we've got Baylor TCU, the rivalry. Did I say that right?
Now it's the Blue Bonnet battle.
Not calling it that.
Just so freaking stupid.
Not calling it that. The rivalry. And on top of all of that, the Iowa State Cyclones are on a bye. And there is no better week of Big 12 football than when I can completely check out of work journalist mode and lounge around all day and watch Big 12 football. So that's why I'm looking most forward to October 18th.
I do that every Saturday. Every Saturday I do that same thing that you just talked about, and it feels amazing.
Yeah, I know. We don't rub it in. No, I'm kidding. I love covering college football. I love covering Iowa State, even Iowa sometimes. But the rare day where you can just sit at home on the couch all day and watch Big 12 football and be locked in and have really no emotional investment, there's nothing better.
And I also forget that you get paid to go. You have to travel to Iowa City and watch Iowa play offense, which I don't know if you could pay me enough to do that.
On that note, any other schedules stand out on the surface?
Yeah, there were actually a few. One that caught my eye just right off the bat when I did look at that long, confusing chart that Aiden put up here was there's some really long stretches that a couple teams have, and it may not be the most difficult teams that these teams have to play, but there are 5 teams in the conference that have to play 7 games in a row without a single break. That's Tech, TCU, Houston, Oklahoma State, and Colorado. And out of those, Houston is the only school that has 4 road games in that 7-game stretch. But as far as teams go here, I mean, Utah, TCU, and Colorado's, I think they look to be some of the toughest out there. Colorado has to play BYU, TCU, Iowa State, Utah, West Virginia, Arizona State, Arizona, Houston, Kansas State. Like, that's about as tough as it gets for a 9-game conference schedule. And TCU here has a stretch where they play SMU, Arizona State, Colorado, Kansas State, and Baylor all in a row. And Utah's pretty damn tough, too. They got 2 road games against Baylor and Kansas and host Kansas State in their final 3 games, which I think is a really tough way to end the season. And I'm actually going to disagree with something you said here earlier. I think one of the most notable things to me is Arizona State. They may have won the Big 12. Go ahead.
I was just about to say I misspoke. They've got a favorable home schedule. Yeah, I did not mean overall schedule.
I know they won the conference last year, but damn, the Big 12 did them zero favors. I mean, listen to these road games. At Baylor, at Utah, at Iowa State, and at Colorado. And even at home, you still get TCU, Tech, Houston, West Virginia, and Arizona. Like Tech and TCU are going to
and at Mississippi State.
Well, I don't know if Mississippi State's going to be much of a threat, but yeah, it's going to be a tough environment in Starkville for sure. But to me, Arizona State really got a tough schedule here, and it's going to be tough for them to repeat as conference champions.
Yeah, when I scrolled down and looked at my notes, I realized that I wrote down Arizona State has a tough schedule.
Oh, okay.
But I do think their home schedule, like if they're going to be in any sort of Big 12 title contention, they can't lose in Tempe. Because the odds of them running the table in that Baylor, Utah, Iowa State, Colorado road stretch, they're probably going to drop 2 of those 4.
That's a really tough stretch.
Yeah, that they did them dirty, and it wouldn't shock me at all if maybe there was a bit of a regression year for Arizona State. One big takeaway I had was if you look at Iowa State and K-State's schedule.
Nice.
I think the winner of Farmageddon has a really, really good shot of starting the year 5-0, 6-0, 7-0, like anywhere in that range. Like whoever wins that game, of course, you're starting not just 1-0, you're starting out 1-0 before you really head into Big 12 play. And their September schedules into early October for the Big 12 is pretty desirable. So whoever wins that game puts themselves in the driver's seat to be one of the 2 teams. And of course, we saw what happened this year. Nothing expected happened. Just when you thought we had it figured out, it zagged. So I don't want to say that it's a pseudo Big 12 championship in the first college football game of the season. But man, Iowa State's schedule breaks out really well. Because of going to Ireland, you get 3 bye weeks. They never play more than 4 games consecutively. They have a bye before BYU, and BYU will be coming off of the Holy War. So a highly emotional rivalry game. And you also get a bye before Kansas, which has been a massive game the last few years. Again, they had a bye this year, and what happened. So how much does a bye really matter? But just the timing of when you get Arizona State. You get them in November. You don't have to go to TCU in September, which is a game that can often be 100 degrees.
That's much better.
Yeah, like there's just nothing about the Iowa State schedule that I would really complain about. And I don't think you can crown a Big 12 champion on February 4th, but there's certainly
you can.
There's certainly. Screw it. Should we do it? Let's go game by game. Oh, we got all night. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. We'll have all spring, all summer to talk Big 12 football leading up to it. But I love nerding out at this stuff and just looking up and down these schedules. It's so fun.
Yeah, and one more thing on that. I think if more teams would realize that they play that week 0 game and get a 3rd bye, I think that it breaks perfectly for both Iowa State and Kansas State. Like you don't really play too long of a stretch. It feels like their schedules just kind of break really at the right time for each one of those bye weeks for me. And you talked about them not having a stretch longer than 4 games, and I just mentioned 5 teams in the conference that have 7-game stretches in a row. So that's a really big thing for both Iowa State and Kansas State. And you're right. I think the winner of that game does have a legitimate chance to start. I wrote in my notes, at least, that Iowa State, I think, could start 6-0 if
heading into Boulder. Yeah,
if they do beat Kansas State in week 0.
Yeah, and this is something we can get into another day. But you just look at the schedule and you think, wow, what if we just slid it 1 row left? What if we just started everything August 23rd? Played that Big 12 championship Black Friday weekend. So then that way we're not playing a national championship on Inauguration Day in late January. But it's not time to get on a soapbox. We'll save that discussion for another slow day. So before we close up with some picks, we've got a random Big 12 basketball player. think, is this our third week of doing it?
Third or fourth? I think it's fourth.
Because I've got one. Aiden, you've got one, or have you gotten two?
I think I got two.
Aiden's got two.
The one I got really quick, I don't remember who it was. But then I got Tez Sherman last week.
Tez Sherman, that's right. Okay.
Or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was.
Okay, so week 4 of random Big 12 basketball player. I need the equalizer.
Well, this is probably going to be the easiest one you're going to get as long as we do this. You guys ready?
Let's do it.
All right.
No.
You better be ready. This former 5-star recruit only played 1 year at a Big 12 school. In that 1 year, he averaged over 20 points, led the Big 12 in scoring, and also in that year, his team finished 5th in the Big 12, made it to the second round of the NCAA tournament.
Finished 5th.
So when you say he spent 1 year there, does that mean it was his freshman year or he transferred there?
Is it?
That's a
Can I just go KD?
No, it's not KD. It's happened within the last 5 years.
Oh, last 5 years.
I'll give you that hint.
Is it Cade Cunningham?
Bingo. You got it.
That's a good one. I
Cade
was trying to think
Cunningham.
if they even made the tournament when he was there.
They did. Second round.
And
I
then-
can't remember who they lost to, but
And then they got banned the next year because of
Yeah.
because of Cade Cunningham.
Because of him.
Well,
Yeah.
Mike Boynton liked to do things a certain way, so it is.
Yeah.
what it is. He's not there anymore. But
Which it is ridiculous how many sanctions that Oklahoma State got that really no one else around the country got. But whatever.
it's because
Poor
it was
Pokes
Oklahoma.
fans.
Yeah, it was
It's
Oklahoma State.
it's not like they care about basketball down there anyways. All right. 2-2, Aiden. I'm coming for you. All right. We both had subpar weeks in the picks, both 1-2 last week, so no minute of fame today. Derek's 3-6 overall. I'm 6-3. We picked out 3 games for this upcoming Saturday. Typically, we do the midweek games. Wouldn't have made a whole lot of sense. So these spreads will probably change a little bit before Saturday based on Tuesday, Wednesday results. But I'll set the number the best that I think. We'll start with the Sunflower Showdown in Manhattan. Kansas on the road at K-State, 1 o'clock tip on ESPN. Ken Palm's got this at about a 6.5 point spread in favor of the Jayhawks.
It's tempting. I want to take Kansas with the way they played, but I'm not fully bought in yet with the consistency. I guess you could probably say the same for Kansas State because we have such a small sample size over the past few games. But with this game being in the Octagon of Doom, it's going to be closer than 6, and I think Kansas State. I'm going to have to take Kansas State here to cover that.
I'll go Jayhawks. I don't know for a fact, but I can't imagine Bill Self really likes Jerome Tang that much. And Kansas is going to have 5 off days to prepare for this game. They already handled them in Fog Allen Fieldhouse. And this will be my concern with Kansas on the road has more of been kind of like a bought-in competitive type thing. Like, are they as up for this game as they would be a game at Fog Allen Fieldhouse? I know they will be up for this game, and I'll take the Jayhawks to continue to own the Sunflower Showdown. Next game, easily the game of the week. A rematch of a pretty good game we saw a couple weeks ago. Texas Tech travels to Arizona for a 9 o'clock Central tip on ESPN. Arizona, favored by 2.5 points over maybe the hottest team in the conference.
Yeah, and I'm going to take the hottest team in the conference here. I'm going to take Texas Tech. I love the way they played against Houston. Obviously, a lot of controversy in that game within the first few minutes there in Houston, but I love the way Texas Tech is playing. Excuse me, I can't say their name, but I think at the end of the year, they're going to be one of those teams that's going to make a deep, deep run in the NCAA tournament. I really love the Red Raiders here. I'm going to take them to win this game.
Red Raiders now ahead of Iowa State and Ken Palm, believe it or not. A crazy fast rise for them. But I'm going to go against you. I think Arizona is going to win this game and cover. To not only be on a huge winning streak, to have one of those games be at Houston, We saw what that atmosphere was like against Iowa State just last week down there in Tucson. I think Arizona's a really good team. They'll be looking for revenge from what happened to them in Lubbock just a couple weeks ago. Give me the Wildcats at home. And we'll close. There wasn't a clear third game that stood out for me, so I chose Iowa State TCU because this game is fascinating. It's an 11 a.m. tip. ESPN Plus. College Game Day is going to be in town, but Iowa State's lost 3 in a row. Ken Palm's got this at about a 15. I put the spread at 13.5. I think it might even be down at 12.5 by game time, but we'll settle at 13.5.
It feels so weird to have a game, College Game Day there, and you're playing a game on the ESPN Plus, but
it doesn't make any sense.
No, it is what it is, though. Iowa State's going to win this game, but they're not going to cover that spread. I'm going to take TCU to cover the spread here, but I do think Iowa State pulls out in the end.
I think Iowa State covers. I can't believe I'm saying that. I had it in my head this whole time that I was probably going to take TCU, but TCU is just not a good team. I don't think K-State's a good team either, but K-State's a talented, expensive team that is maybe clicking at the right time. I don't necessarily feel the same about TCU. Iowa State will get a little bit of rest. They don't have to travel back from Arizona. They're traveling 3 hours. I think they'll be ready to go, ready to make a statement, and they'll be coming off of a tough week of practice. And maybe not blow them out, but probably a comfortable-ish win at Hilton Coliseum. And if not, oh boy.
They sure need it. That's for damn sure.
That is for sure. I think that's going to do it. I think we got through it all. We had some rivalry talk, but I was kind of ready to get to football, if I'm being honest. So what we were going to talk about was the need for some new rivals in the Big 12, just with the amount of new teams there are. So we can save that for another day. But I think for now, unless you've got anything else, I think we're good to go on this week's edition of Bigger Than 12.
No, I'm just looking forward to another great week of basketball. Plenty of big games ahead here. Starting tonight, obviously, is a recording Wednesday, and of course on Saturday. So I still got a lot to look forward to here in the next week.
Awesome. Well, good to see you, Derek. We will be back normal on Sunday for hopefully the rest of the basketball season. Until then, thanks for supporting Bigger Than 12 on Iowa Everywhere. We'll see you next week.